Want to welcome everybody to the Suburban Wellness Group podcast, where we have Dr. Elizabeth Lombardo. We are very grateful to have her on. I want to read her bio before we start, and I want to get right into it. Dr. Elizabeth Lombardo is the authority on how to crush your inner critic. I love that. So that you can live a life of purpose, fulfillment, and true success. She's America's most trusted celebrity psychologist, with over 100 national media interviews, including Today's Show, Good Morning America, Dr. Oz, Fox Business News, Wall Street Journal, Forbes, and countless others. She considered Shaquille O'Neal's head coach of happiness. We have to ask you about that. Dr. Elizabeth Lombardo is on a mission to help you recognize your real self-worth so you can live the life you've always dreamed of. 4 different books. 7 strategies to crush your inner critic, a happy you, your ultimate prescription for happiness, from entitlement to intention, raising purpose-driven children. That I love. Goodbye, and also goodbye imposter syndrome. Dr. Lombardo, welcome, welcome. It's truly an honor and pleasure. Yeah. So let's get right into this.
Jump in with both feet.
Let's jump in with both feet. Inner critic. Learned helplessness. What is learned helplessness?
Yeah. So we'll start with the inner critic. Inner critic is that little voice inside of us that says, you're not good enough, right? Who do you think you are? I can't believe you just said that. There's no way you could be successful. And sometimes our inner critic beats us up, and sometimes it beats other people up. But when you have that going on in your mind, it can be very distressing and cause things like stress and overwhelm and anxiety and hopelessness and worthlessness. Now, when we talk about learned helplessness, this is something, and I'm sure you've been seeing it a lot too, especially with what's going on in the world right now with pandemic. Learned helplessness is this notion of there's nothing I can do. And in the 70s, I'm going to share a research study to really demonstrate how powerful this is. In the early 70s, they psychologists randomly assigned dogs to 3 different categories. And as I share this, I'm not comparing you to a dog, but they couldn't do this experiment on people. They probably couldn't do it on dogs anymore either, but it wasn't that bad. So first group of dogs, every time they hit a lever, they got some food. Hit the lever a couple times, ate a whole bunch, pranced away, satiated, happy as can be. Second group, every time they hit the lever, they got a shock, right? A painful stimulus. They hit it once, maybe twice, realized that's not for me, pranced off, happy as can be. The third group, every time the dogs hit the lever, they got food or a shock, but there's no rhyme or reason to it. And that group of dogs ended up scouring in the corner, such that even if you brought it food, it wouldn't eat. And if you've ever brought a dog food, it always eats. So what happened from that experience was this learned helplessness. It induced a state of depression. I call this in my experience cable guy syndrome. My family and I have moved around a fair amount, and every time we move, we call the cable guy to install the internet and everything, because what could we do without internet? And inevitably it's, yes, he'll be there or she'll be there. It's actually always been a man. He'll be there between 9 and 12, and it's 11, it's 12, it's 1, it's 2, I'm calling, I'm texting, I can't get a hold of anyone, and it feels so frustrating. That's learned helplessness too. And what's going on a lot in our society is a lot of helplessness, a lot of learned helplessness. Here's what you can't do, because we got COVID and we got stuff going on, and you can't do this and you can't do that and you can't do that. And so what it instills in a lot of people is this sense of there's nothing I can do. And that is a huge source of distress.
I find this fascinating. It leads to depression. What percentage of Americans have this?
Well, I don't know. We don't actually have a study on that. We do know that stress levels and mental health issues are really skyrocketing right now.
Right.
And will continue to do so. Unfortunately, I think a lot of people thought when the doors open, but the research really on pandemics and on quarantines in the past shows that this trauma really continues. So we have a mental health crisis, or certainly a potential for mental health crisis, in front of us right now. Bad news. Good news is it's very, very treatable. And for some people that will mean, speaking with a psychologist. It will mean talking to their doctor. For a lot of people, it doesn't mean that. It just means let's get some skills that are going to help empower you so that you do feel like you have more of a sense of control, and to help crush that inner critic so that you can say, instead of I can't do anything, you answer the question, what can I do? What can I do?
Let's get into the skills in a few seconds. Let's go back a little bit. What was the motivating factor in your life to learn about learned helplessness?
What was the motive? I mean, it's such an experience that so many people have. So when I was getting my PhD, I mean, it was kind of grounded into us. I will say, from a personal standpoint of view, I've been given the opportunity to practice what I preach. So with everything going on, I also have the love of my life. My husband and I have been together for longer, over half of my life now. I'm younger than he is. And about 5 years ago, he started having some kind of precarious health situation, and we went from doctor to doctor to doctor. And actually, I used to be a physical therapist, so I knew exactly what they were going to diagnose him with. And we went up to finally went up to Mayo Clinic, and they confirmed a diagnosis of ALS, which is Lou Gehrig's disease, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, degenerative, horrible disease. Prognosis is 3 to 5 years. And the Mayo Clinic doctor literally said, take him home to prepare. There was no, maybe you could try this treatment. There's something experimental. You may consider this. There was none of that. It was just take him home to prepare. And so you want to talk about a potential for learned helplessness, right? There's nothing I can do. The love of my life, the father of my 2 children, is going to slowly die in front of us. And so we went through a period of kind of shock, and then we asked the question, what can we do? So there's no known cure. We could sit around and be in a state of depression until he died. Our question is, what can we do? And this goes into these strategies, which is whenever we are faced with a dilemma, a problem, a situation that we don't want, we always have 2 strategies to deal with it. And the first one is problem focused. How do you change the problem itself, right? So for us, we said, okay, there's no conventional treatment for this. Great. Let's look at unconventional treatments, right? Let's look at alternatives. And there was one time we were working with a medical doctor out of DC. For 10 months, I gave him 6 IV antibiotics a day. And he got significantly better. Awesome. And we've been working with all kinds of doctors all over the country, actually the world. I took him to Mexico right before Christmas last year for a 5-week treatment. So the problem focus is changing the problematic situation. Over the past couple of years, he's been declining, and now he's extremely, extremely ill. So we're also focused on this whole other strategy, which is emotion-focused coping. Emotion-focused coping is how can we change our emotional reaction to it. So even if there's nothing we can do to change the situation, problem-focused, we always have this other strategy of how can you change your emotional reaction to it. So personally in our lives, the things that we do are focus on gratitude, right? He's still alive. Right now, he's still speaking, although that's dwindling away, and that will be gone probably sooner than later. But being grateful that we can still have conversations, spending time together, being really present, being grateful for the experiences that we have had, the love that we have, all of that. So that's the emotion-focused coping. It doesn't necessarily change the situation, but it helps us deal better with it. So whether you're dealing with the death of a loved one, or the stress of COVID, or whatever, we all deal with issues. It is so vital that we always remember those 2 strategies, because so often people focus on the problem focused, and if there's nothing they can do, like cable guy syndrome, right? I can't get hold of the cable guy. I can choose to also address my emotional reaction, i.e. remind myself, Elizabeth, it ain't that big of a deal if the internet isn't in your house for a day or 2, right? No one dies from that. So I share my personal story because in the past I've talked about this, and people are like, what does she know about difficulty? I'm living and breathing this stuff too. It doesn't mean it's easy, but it always, because we always have this whole other strategy, it means we're never stuck. We're never helpless. We can always address what's going on up here.
Very interesting. Emotion and problem-focused, emotion-focused. Thank you for the personal share. That's just a story thank you for that personal share. What are some of you talk about 7 strategies in your book. What are some of the strategies? What are some of the other strategies?
Yeah, so those strategies are really about perfectionism. So the book is, oh wait, I just happen to have it here.
Excellent.
In Spanish, English, and Mandarin. So this is really about perfectionism. Perfectionism is not just people who like to have a neat junk drawer, right, where every pen is neatly aligned and the paper clips are stacked according to color and size. Perfectionism is a much broader concept, and it's an all or nothing concept. Something's perfect or it's a failure. It's right or everything else is wrong, right? It's the way that I think things should be or everything else is wrong. Perfectionism, a great example of perfectionism in our society is New Year's resolutions, right? January 1st comes and people give up all sugar, all alcohol, and they're going to go to the gym every day. And then January 2nd comes along, right? And I had a cookie, I might as well have the whole plate. Or I didn't get to the gym this week, I can't work out. That all or nothing mentality. And that is really a component of our inner critic, because the perfectionist, again, thinks in all or nothing. It's either perfect or it's a failure. So one mistake on a presentation is a failure. And then they take one step further. If it was a failure, then I'm a failure. And that personalizing of I'm a failure, that globalizing that I'm a failure, not just in that presentation where I jumbled up my words, but in life, obviously plays a huge impact on how we interact with the world.
Oh, I understand that. It's that black and white world, that all or none. And I can say that I do that with my life. From when I was in school, if I didn't get an A or I didn't get 100, I'm a total failure. If I wasn't able to score the winning touchdown that day, I'm a total failure. And it does lead, you start beating yourself up constantly over this. And
I'm a recovering perfectionist, so I can totally relate. And I will tell you, high five.
You're right.
Tell a perfectionist something doesn't have to be perfect, and this is what they'll say. No, I know. Yeah. But this is what they'll think. Yes, it does. Right?
Oh,
because
yeah.
Their self-worth. So I specifically wrote this book, and I call it Better Than Perfect. It's not give up perfectionism. It's not, it doesn't have to be perfect. Although when they translated it into Spanish, it says Nadie es perfecto, which I think means nothing is perfect, which really goes against everything I was saying, but I speak French and not Spanish, so I didn't write that. For me, and I'm sure you can relate to this too, I truly believe that my perfectionism was what propelled my success, right? Because I was a perfectionist, I got all A's, and I have 3 graduate degrees, and I'm on stages all over the world. And I thought it was that perfectionism that made me so successful. And then I started asking myself, could I keep the good of perfectionism and get rid of the not so good? And the reason why I decided this, perfectionism causes a lot of stress within ourselves, within our relationships. And I knew that my perfectionism was, a bit of a strain on my lovely husband. I was okay with that. What I wasn't okay with, I loved it. What I wasn't okay with was when I noticed my perfectionism rubbing off on my children. And that's where I said, enough. I must make a change. And so then I started asking myself, can I keep the good of perfectionism, striving for excellence, wanting to make a positive change? Can I keep that good stuff, right? Still going for an A+. We're not going to shoot for a C-. We're still going for an A+. But can we keep the good stuff and get rid of the inner critic, get rid of the judging, and I call it shitting all of ourselves. I should do this. I should do that. Can we get rid of that? And I equate perfectionism with a chocolate cake, partly because I like thinking about chocolate cake, but just bear with me on this analogy. Picture and imagine that you are baking a chocolate cake and you have all the finest ingredients, right? You have milk from cows that get massaged daily, right? You have cage-free eggs from chickens that only listen to Mozart. You have the finest of chocolate. You have all these wonderful ingredients, and you're mixing it up, and you can almost smell it. And then you put a cup of dirt, put it in, mix it up, and bake that cake. Now, would you eat the cake? Hopefully not, right? Yes, they're great ingredients, but you got the dirt. And better than perfect is the cake without the dirt, right? It's all those wonderful ingredients that will help us all be better without the judging. controlling the inner critic, getting rid of that distress of shoulding and you have to be better. And so that's the purpose of Better Than Perfect. And I don't know if you've written books, but I will tell you, and you know this, all self-help authors, whether they'll admit it or not, we write books for ourselves. And then, I wanted to share it with everyone else, but I had to go through all this myself. And I will say, I am a recovering perfectionist because of this book, because I researched it. The book is it's very workbooky. I'm very much like, here's an idea. How does it apply to your life? So it's very workbooky. And so when you work through it, it's really powerful. And I will say, since dropping my perfectionism, controlling my perfectionism, my business has soared. My speaking, career, and even just my performance soared. My ability to give TV interviews, so much, but everything has become better. I thought it was going to become worse, but it's become better because I'm more authentic. Because when I get on stage and I trip, I don't freak out. I simply make fun of myself and move on. If I'm on the Today Show and they ask me, I was on the Today Show once and they asked me a question and I had no idea the answer. It was fine. I just kind of played with it and moved on. I didn't freak out. I didn't beat myself up. I will tell you, the perfectionist in me would still be beating myself up over that. And it happened probably like 5 years ago. So.
And you would be embarrassed about that moment. My career is over. I understand what you're saying. I am a recovering perfectionist because you do think that perfectionism will lead you to that success. You're hardworking and you're thinking that perfection will go. Now, you're changing a mindset here. Is that correct? Is that what you're looking? You're pivoting away from perfection. Can you talk about that change in mindset?
Yeah. So again, the first is to realize what is the cost of perfectionism, right? I say, what is the cost of perfectionism, and what are the pros of perfectionism, right? What are you getting out of it, and what is it costing you? It's kind of like if someone comes to me and says they want to quit smoking. One of the first questions I ask them is, what's good about smoking? And they look at me like, what are you talking about? Smoking's bad for you. It stinks. Okay, well, you do it. So there must be something that you are getting out of it. And the reason why it's important, whether you're quitting smoking or changing your perfectionism, is because whatever you're getting out of it that's positive, we need to make sure we replace it with something that's beneficial. So again, a lot of people think perfectionism, the benefit of my perfectionism is it pushes me to excel. Great. What if you could excel and strive for that A+ without the stress? Would that be important to you? Absolutely. So we take what's working. We don't get rid of it because that's what scares a lot of perfectionists. Wait a minute. Again, I can't go for a C-. I need the A+. But then we help people realize, and this is a little tough for some people, and I'm going to say it with so much love. We help people realize that they are human.
I was going to say that they're not perfect.
It hurts some people to know that. But they're not human, and that's okay. And I have a saying, it's not failure, it's data. It's not failure, it's data. When you get an outcome that you don't want, instead of getting out the proverbial punching gloves, just say, what can I learn from this? How can I grow from this? How can I make things better now? What could I do in the future for myself? How can I teach others? How can I use this? And that's a very powerful and empowering way to view things. And I will tell you, the other thing to consider is, I tell my clients is, everyone loves an inspirational story, right? Look at Hollywood. It's all about inspirational stories. And inspirational stories are 2 ingredients. 1, a very difficult issue, struggle that people are dealing with. 2, overcoming that. So if you're in the struggle, whether you're a perfectionist or anything else that's going on in your life, if you're in the struggle, you are literally halfway to being an inspiring story. So when you keep that in mind, you're like, half down, half to go.
I love that. So I think it's also very powerful with your book. It's more of a workbook. So you're going over, you're discussing a topic, and then how does this apply to your life, and what can you do to make it better? Give us an example of that. Give us another example of somebody with that.
Of this particular book, or in
yes, at this particular book.
Okay, this did come out in 2014. So let me see. Oh, okay. Here's a good one. This is good stuff. Now,
I like it.
So we all have a rule book of how people should act, how we should act, how others should act. And we know a lot of times we aren't aware of our rule book, but we're aware when the rules are broken. And I was actually on a TV show once in New York, and the guy who was interviewing me was like, rule book. He's like, now do men have rule books too? And I'm like, well, here's the thing. Women have a manifesto, men have a pamphlet, but we all have a rule book. Generalization, I know, meant for humor. Please don't take that personally, anyone out there. But we know that we have these rules when they are broken, right? So when we get upset about what someone did because they should have done something different, that's a red flag. And so you want to ask yourself, are these rules, first of all, do they make sense? And second of all, are they helpful? Right? So a rule that, when I'm in the red zone, we'll talk about red zone probably in a minute. When I'm in the red zone and I go into we have a 12, no, we don't. No, we have a 14 and 16-year-old. That's how quickly time goes by. I have a 14 and 16-year-old. I was going to say 12 and 14-year-old. And when I go into their rooms, I know this is surprising, but sometimes there are clothes on the floor. And and so I will, if I'm in the red zone, if I'm in this place of stress, I'll be like, oh, they should pick up their clothes because that is disrespectful to me. So my rule is when I'm upset, if they respected me, they would pick up their clothes. Now, when I take a step back, it's not that is completely like out there. It's not like I'm talking about aliens or whatever. But is that a rule that's accurate? I mean, with all due respect, my kids aren't thinking about me when they're throwing stuff on the floor, right? But when I personalize it, it then becomes this whole issue. So when we identify what are our rules, are they accurate? Are they rules that you want to have? And if not, then we can change them. And if so, then clearly communicate in an assertive way what your rule is and see if that is okay. Work it out with the other person. So, and do it in an assertive way. Assertive way is when you're respectful to yourself and you're respectful to someone else. Aggressive is when you yell, when one yells, clean up your freaking room, right?
Right.
And that's when we're being, respectful to ourselves, but we're not being respectful to the other person. Then there's passive aggressive. Must be nice to sit around and do nothing, right? That's not respecting yourself. That's not respecting them. Then there's passive. I'm not going to say anything. Proverbial steam coming out of the ears, right? That's when we're trying to be respectful to them. I don't want to ruffle any feathers, but we're not being respectful to ourselves. So when we notice a rule that's really important to us, it's important to be assertive. Here's what's important to me. How can we make this work?
How can we make this better? I totally agree. We have a 12-year-old, and we understand the room is dirty, and we had a situation here literally yesterday, and how can we make this better? Now, you mentioned the red zone. What is the red zone?
My new book, so that's why it's like, woo, right here.
Yes.
So the red zone, for those who watch American football, that's not what this is. This is a state of distress. So in psychology, we use the term distress to mean any emotion you don't want. Because some stress is positive, right? Some stress, like if someone's planning their wedding, woo, that's kind of stressful, but we call it eustress. That's positive stress. So distress is any emotion you don't want. Sadness, frustration, guilt, shame, anger, overwhelm, worry, hopelessness, helplessness, worthlessness. All that goes in the distress pile. And distress is on a continuum. It goes from 0, no distress at all. You just got off the massage table, life is great, to 10 out of 10. So a 10 out of 10 anger, for example, might be yelling or the proverbial steam coming out of the ears. Hopefully we don't spend a whole lot of time at 10. We probably aren't at 0 a whole lot either, but it's important that we realize, and in fact, the viewers right now, I just asked you, where are you right now in your level of distress? And notice how it changes. It changes maybe according to who you're with, what you're doing, your physiology, right? We've all heard of the term hangry, right? When we're hungry.
Sure.
And so it goes from 0 to 10, and at a 7 out of 10 or higher, I call it the red zone. And in the red zone, we think and act differently than we do in what I call the green zone, the 0, the 1, the 2. So when we're in the green zone, when our distress is 0, 1, 2, or 3, we're using that beautiful structure you and I were talking about earlier, the frontal lobe, right? The frontal lobe differentiates us from other animals. It allows us to engage in executive functioning, problem solving, perspective taking, right? When we're in the green zone, we can see different perspectives. And in fact, when we're in the green zone and our kid doesn't clean up the room, we're like, ugh, kids, come on, come on, Joey, let's do it. But as we go up on that distress scale, our focus narrows. And when we get in the red zone, we're focusing almost exclusively on the negatives. We call it negative filtering, focusing on what's wrong. When we're in the red zone, we tend to personalize other people's behavior. So with Joey, who's leaving the stuff on the floor, when in red zone, we're personalizing, you know, like I was saying before, they don't respect me. When we are in the red zone, I call it limbic hijack. So your limbic system, emotional reasoning, right? Fight or flight. It hijacks our frontal lobe. So we don't always think rationally when we're in the red zone, and we don't always act rationally. And in fact, I always tell my coaching clients, if you're in the red zone, don't let anything out of your mouth, because that's when we say things we later regret. And don't put anything in your mouth, because that's when we consume things we later regret. So we want to be really wary of when we're in the red zone, and do something healthy and helpful to get out of it before you ever react. Because I'm sure we've all had the experience where said something, we're like, wow, I can't believe I said that. Or, you know, we did something, threw something, whatever it was. And when we were out of the red zone, we thought, that probably wasn't the best solution to that problem.
Right. How do you get out of this red zone? What are some of the techniques to get? I find this fascinating. The green zone, the red zone, when we're in this red zone, how do we get out of it? Because there are times, I would say, that our listeners, and I've experienced this, once you're in that red zone, sometimes it may feel good. It's like you're going, right?
And feel so justified. I had a client the other day, and
yes,
we've been working on his gratitude. And we know from the functional MRI studies that when we experience gratitude, the stress centers in our brain actually reduce activity. But she told me she was like at a 9 out of 10, and she said, Dr. E, I knew I should be grateful, but I didn't want to be. So yeah, we feel justified when we're in the red zone. And so what can you do to reduce your distress? I think, and I find in my clinical practice and my personal practice, there are different tools that we'll use in the red zone. Because if we're kind of proactively addressing our stress, meditation, right, getting our sleep, proper nutrition, spending time with loved ones, that can be wonderful. When we're in the red zone, they may work or they may not. The best way to get out of the red zone is to move your body. Jump on the bed, go for a walk, do a minute or two of push-ups, sit-ups, planks, squats. Moving your body, changing your physiology, changing your state causes biochemical changes that then get us out of the red zone so that we can start to see things differently. And sometimes people will be like, well, I can't, you know, if I'm angry, I can't just go for a 10-mile hike. You literally don't have to. If you did a 2-minute plank, I promise you would feel it, right? You do squats for 2 minutes, 3 minutes, you're going to feel it. It's going to be that release. In fact, I have one of those small trampolines I'm in my home office, and I taught my kids this concept, and especially tends to be with math homework, especially gets them in the red zone. And they will actually come, pull out the trampoline, jump on it for a couple minutes, and then go back and finish their math homework. Because they know, because not only do we not think rationally, but we can't solve problems as effectively when we're in the red zone, right? We get stuck, we become a victim of circumstances. So just by jumping on the little trampoline or a bed or whatever you want to do in terms of moving your body, it gets us out of the red zone, and then we're better able to handle whatever we're faced with.
I think this is so important because you get those endorphins going, you get those enkephalins going by exercise. And what you're saying, I find fascinating because math homework is the worst. And with the kids at home during COVID, am I right? The kids.
Brand some of those personalized trampolines and be selling them because they're great.
I think this is a great idea. I want a piece of the action being on the podcast, because what I say to my son, you know what, especially with math, listen, go puck handle. My son plays hockey. Go puck handle. Go do some push-ups. Do 3 sets of 10.
Yep.
Get this up and going. It clears your mind. It clears your mind and it gets you to feel better. Yep. I love that. I love that.
Exercise non-pharmacological Xanax. It is
yes.
so powerful. And we know from the research, there's some really great studies out of Duke looking at people with mild depression, moderate depression, even those with severe depression, which is so hard to treat. And when they randomly assign people to exercise or antidepressant medications, in general, same outcome. long-term exercise is better. Now, as I say that, I'm not saying get off your antidepressant medications if you're on them, not at all. I am saying exercise is such a powerful tool. And you know, I used to be a physical therapist, and I went to school for a really long time. So I taught group fitness for almost 20 years. And so I'm going to tell you, you don't have to go running. I hate running, but there are some things that I love. So what do you like to do? Dancing around the room. Put on some great music, dance around the room. That's a great thing to do. So anything that you can do to move your body, music can be helpful. And then the other one that I find really helpful to get out of the red zone is laughter. So there are a couple of comedians who I find hysterical. And if I am in the red zone or I'm creeping up into the red zone, sometimes I'll just hop on YouTube and I'll watch one of those videos. And the laughter is another great way to have those biochemical changes to get us out of the red zone.
Changes your whole physiology, changes your whole biochemistry. You feel better, and you can probably make better decisions, right? Like you were saying at that point.
So it goes back to our problem focus versus emotion focus, right? When we're stressed out about something, when we get out of the red zone, that's emotion focus because I feel better then. But then also we go from I can't solve a problem to, oh, here are some ideas of what I can do. So it allows us to then really focus on the problem focused also.
What are some of the types of clients you see in your practice? What are they?
Who are these people?
Yeah, I'm interested.
So I tend to work with people who I say are successful on paper, right? Mm-hmm. My average client is doing quite well on paper, financially, with their work, that kind of thing. And truly, 90% of the time when the door closes, or I have a lot of clients who, even before the pandemic, we did a lot of Zoom calls. One of the first things they say to me is, my friends would never believe that I'm talking to you. Because they seem like they got it all together, but we all have an inner critic, right? And so helping them really address what's going on up here. I have something I call the true success formula, which I've created after working with clients for over 2 decades. And it's this notion that how society defines success, more money, driving a certain car, a certain job title. My clients have all that. I work with, some of my clients are household names, not all of them, but they have all that. And even they're like, So, they don't feel fulfilled. So there's 3 components of the true success formula: passion, purpose, and people. Passion is positive energy, even during difficult times, right? My husband is literally dying right now. I'm sad about that. And I really stay in a place of passion. So even during difficult times, how can you have that positive energy? Purpose is having meaning in our lives. It is human nature to have meaning in our lives. And if we don't proactively figure out what it is and enjoy it, we will unfortunately absorb a different meaning. And there are a lot of people out there whose meaning in life is to be a victim, the biggest victim, right? They're the people who, I haven't gotten a good night's sleep. I didn't sleep well last night. I haven't slept well in 6 years. You know what I mean? Like they're the victim of the circumstances, of the weather, of their past. And that's not to say what people have experienced hasn't been challenging. What are you going to do about it now? So finding meaning and purpose in your life is the second. And then the third component is people. How do you optimize relationships, right? Well, we are social beings, and somehow not everyone acts the way that I think that they should. So how can we, learn the skills of how to really optimize our relationships with others, whether it's our personal life, whether it's our professional life, our communities. And when we have those 3 ingredients, that's when we really strive and thrive with true success.
I love that. We are coming up on the hour. It seems like we just started. And we're coming up on the hour. I'm going to ask you back on because I think there's so much more to talk about. I want to delve into this true success formula. So if you're interested, I'd love to have you back on, Dr. Lombardo, and get more into this.
And then you asked me who I work with, and we were talking about this before. I have a private practice of sports psychology. Sports psychology is a really important and often forgotten component of peak performance. And so working with mostly adolescents, some collegiate, I've worked with some professional, but the practice is mostly with adolescents to really optimize their mindset so that they can play better, even if they, made a mistake, even if, whatever's going on, they can optimize what goes on up here, because what goes on up here impacts everything that goes on out there.
Sports is 90% mental.
Yes. And yet how many people address the mental, right? They're doing the strength training and flexibility, and they're practicing their skills, and all of that those are necessary ingredients. I will say, if you want to be better at your sport, or you want someone who you love to be better at your sport, sports psychology is the secret ingredient that most people aren't doing. And when these skills are learned, I call it putting broccoli in marinara sauce, because what the kids think they're eating the marinara, but they get into broccoli. When they work with me or my team, they think that they're working on their sport, and they are. But what they don't realize is how to be resilient, how to be confident regardless of what's going on. You know, how to develop that grit is important, whether you're playing a sport or you're in a social situation and people aren't being kind to you, or you're out in the job world. And so these are skills that really are important, not only for sports, but for life. And once you get a skill, it's there forever.
It's there forever, and you can use it for whatever situation. You know, I mean, for myself, you know, in high school in the 1970s, we actually did have a psychologist come in.
Wow.
And this is in the 1970s. You're talking about a totally different time frame. Yeah. Visualization, positive visualization. The play was done already. The game was won before we stepped out onto the field or the track meet. We already, it was done. It was just a matter of going to do this. This, you've opened up another Pandora's box for us to talk about. It's just another box we've opened up. I know we're at the top of the hour. How can people get in touch with you?
So they can go to elizabethlombardo.com. That is who I am. And right now we have a freebie. If you go to elizabethlombardo.com, there is an induction to help boost our immune system. Stress depletes our immune system. And whether we're concerned about COVID or just being healthy in general, it's a really wonderful way to help enhance your immune system to be healthier, both emotionally and physically. So if you go to elizabethlombardo.com, you can get that for free.
I love it. And then what's the sports psychology?
Oh, Elevate Sports Psychology.
Elevate Sports Psychology. I love it. Dr. Lombardo, we're going to put all of that onto the podcast so that individuals can go right over to you. Awesome. I want to thank you very much for coming on to the podcast. I'm going to invite you back on, but there's so much more to talk about. I think we just scratched the surface. I love your energy. I love your passion. Thank you for being on.
Thank you. I'm very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. For everybody, please, elizabethlombardo.com, elevatesportspsychology.com. Please give her a call. Thank you very much, and we'll see you the next time.